In the most surprising twist of 2025 so far, I'm making a video covering Payday 2 and actually speculating on the game's future. Despite being told numerous times that it is in fact a dead game, and the only content updates we'd receive would be to literally patch licensed content out of it, Starbreeze's new CEO, Adolf Christiansen of EA fame, has inferred that there is an update coming for the evergreen title, assumedly on a PC. Let's have a listen to what he has to say for himself.
Yes, we have at least one small content update ready for Payday 2, which we will release over the next weeks or months. We haven't decided how we're going to progress with this. This needs to be a very clear plan for both Payday 2 and Payday 3. Both franchises or both iterations of the franchise are very important to us, very close to our heart. So we'll make sure that we have a great pipeline in place for Payday 3 and keep Payday 2 well and alive with updates going forward.
Wow, so could that be a slip-up? A first day in the job rookie error? A misunderstanding of terms or mishearing of Payday 3? Well, from what I know about this guy's history, he actually understands video games, which is not something you can guarantee from a gaming CEO these days. And furthermore, I believe he likely fully grasped the question and understood the terminology he used to respond to it. Shocking, I know. In fact, for many, this announcement will have come out of left field, signaling just how significantly Payday 3 must be struggling if they're genuinely considering pulling out the necromancy tome once more to bring the creaking diesel engine back from its eternal rest. But for me, it's not a surprise at all. If anything, this is a logical next step in re-establishing the brand and profiting from the franchise now they have full publishing rights back under the Starbreeze umbrella. Yes, that's correct. As we heard earlier from Adolf, known to his friends as AK, during the presentation portion of the report, Starbreeze have reacquired Payday's full publishing rights from Plaion via equity in the form of a share issue in parent company Embracer's name, a business move with some seriously wide-reaching ramifications for the future of the series. In theory, it should grant them the freedom to develop and market without red tape and a dissenting voice in the back of their heads. Freedom to expand licensing endeavours, including crossovers and merge, without as much oversight, and most importantly, the freedom to fully invest in Payday without trepidation. As we've been told, this repurchase means 100% of Payday 3 revenue is being retained by Starbreeze. Of course, once they're in the green on Payday 3 and it starts to turn a profit above development expenses, 33% of that sum will be entitled to Digital Bros, up to a $40 million cap. Which is why it makes at least some sense to diversify that Payday offering. They're in the process of that already, with whatever the hell the PUBG crossover turns into, but going back to producing content for Payday 2 is undoubtedly another, lower risk way of going about that revenue diversification process, meaning it's not as far-fetched as it might initially sound. In fact, I'm willing to go a step further and suggest there was potentially a clause in the original Plaion contract preventing such a move, as they stood to gain nothing from it, which is why Adolf is able to mention this plan for a small content update at this specific time. And also, take a step backwards and have a look at what else he's saying. All these other surprisingly positive factors and signals coming from the new CEO point towards a greater overall focus on Payday as a franchise. The lore and licensing is of particular interest to a fan like myself, who believes they've been sitting on a goldmine of interesting and potentially profitable materials in the form of expanded media. Anything from graphic novels to TV adaptations, which we finally heard rumours of once more in this presentation. The financial outlook also indicates a solid Q1 for Payday 3, with the PS Plus deal and Jacket DLC driving much higher than anticipated net sales. The company remains loss-making in the quarter, but that's only after accounting for development expenses of the unreleased Project Baxter and the fixed amortization of Payday 3's development costs. I'm not alarmed by this result. It's actually surprisingly optimistic, bearing in mind how little Starbreeze did with Payday 3 in the quarter. So, with an exceptionally positive cash position, clear signs that Payday is still a powerhouse franchise that can turn a profit, and plenty of headroom to invest, it just seems like a no-brainer to lean slightly on what's still your most popular title. Unlike under previous leadership, I get this impression that Payday is once again at the core of Starbreeze's business. I'm actually quite impressed by Adolf, as he seems to have steered the ship in that direction and just gets it, at least somewhat. I sense a disbelief in his voice as to how the Payday franchise has been allowed to rot. So if we take into account the CEO's messaging and my pet theory that Baxter is going to be delayed until 2027, it's paramount to the studio that they're able to sustain at least one cash cow. So yes, I do actually believe that responsibility will fall upon Payday 2, and there should be an update releasing in the coming months. So much so, I'm going to spend the remainder of this video discussing what it could and should entail, as well as stressing the importance of how they frame and release it to avoid killing off all hope in Payday 3's future. You see, Payday 2, as much as it's heralded as a more complete experience for co-op heisting game fans, has its fair share of issues, some of which have been exacerbated since supposedly entering maintenance mode late in 2023. Whilst many of these I only notice in passing during my challenge runs, thanks to well-known chronicler of community anger and part-time heavy Seadog, I'm aware of how widely frustrated the Payday 2 faithful are, especially with the many undocumented changes added in Update 240.3. For just a taster, I've seen complaints around increasing spawns and changing spawn logic, jokers inexplicably requiring more damage to obtain, unnecessary alterations to how damage over time functions, as well as unwarranted nerfs to pellet firing shotguns and the shock and awe skill. And even before all those sweeping alterations, which were so unpopular they had conspiracy theories flying around that Starbreeze were deliberately sabotaging their own game to get people to move on to the shiny new toy, they were already royally pissing people off. At just the tip of the iceberg are the widely disliked damage range multiplier adjustments, which serve little purpose within the arcadey Payday 2 other than limiting the viable arsenal, as well as the insane hacker functionality tweaks that left it as probably the most broken perk deck in the game. That's without even going into the more niche issues and perpetual crashing problems that still plague the game to this day. Many of these frequent pain points being addressed, reverted, or at least reconsidered in their implementation would be an excellent start if they want to win back that hardcore community that have stuck with Payday 2 for so long. I can't help but think the game has more to give, even if they don't decide to go down the route of increasing the heist and weapon bloat again. However, another major issue the game has faced in the past 12 months is the opposite of that outcome. The removal of content related to expired licensing contracts has acted as a stark warning of what can happen when you load up your title with flash-in-the-pan crossovers. The outcome is that new players will miss out on 1 perk deck, 15 weapons, a smattering of attachments, 4 playable characters and 7 heists, acting as a permanent psychological barrier to entry for people considering picking up the game in 2025. What Starbreeze need to do is find a way to create alternatives for as much of that now locked content as possible, even if that comes in the form of a DLC. I don't expect them to release entire map alternatives to heists that are now inaccessible for new players unless you join a lobby online, but like Leech was to Scarface's Lost Kingpin perk deck, I'd love to see replacement weapons and new attachments to fit the lost niches once filled by this licensed content. So much of it being gone is nonsensical if you ask me, and just pushes players towards the dark side of modding, if you catch my drift. Losing the Contractor, Ice Pick and Union in particular really stings, and don't get me started on the fact new players won't get a chance to experience Jimmy's dulcet tones.
Lads are fucking terrible negotiators!
If you'd like to learn more about the long-lost Payday 2 licensed content, KevKill has an excellent rundown of what's now missing, and agrees that it's not really a situation Starbreeze should be letting lie. In addition to the content itself going missing, achievement earning has also become a massive issue which will put off some of the completionists Payday 2 was so good at attracting. That in mind, I'd love to see some creative workarounds to give players the opportunity to legitimately earn those now extra tricky challenges locked behind even more than just a simple paywall. Essentially, my thoughts on Payday 2 were always that it should be left alone at some point, but in the best possible state. What's happened over the past year or so instead is that a couple of pieces have fallen off or been replaced with inferior versions, leaving it in desperate need of a little restoration. Despite that, the game still sees impressive daily player figures across Steam alone, and whilst yes, many of those numbers are likely bot inflated, even if you were uncharitable with your estimate, you'd still have to admit enough of a player base exists within Payday 2 to not only warrant updating the game, but potentially make doing so lucrative for Starbreeze. However, all of this interest and optimism does need to be caveated by a dose of reality. Whilst I don't believe it's necessarily the wrong move to update Payday 2 on Steam once more, Starbreeze do need to be cautious in how they frame it. If it's perceived as abandoning ship, it runs the very real risk of killing Payday 3 for good, which isn't the sort of collateral damage they can afford. That's not even getting into the problem of staffing, bearing in mind finding developers with genuine diesel engine experience and a desire to work in a development language with about as much of a future as Latin will be challenging to say the least. Not impossible, just look at what the Mug team have achieved with Raid World War II in recent months, but still a bloody nightmare of a prospect for devs looking to move forwards, not backwards in their careers. In an ideal world, they'd be able to pour resources into supporting both games via separate teams, as we saw from Vermintide 2 and Darktide at Fat Shark, bearing in mind both studios are a similar size, whilst also fully updating console editions. But we all know that's pure fantasy. The best we can really hope for are fixes and tweaks to Payday 2 that maintain the game's longevity whilst helping fund Payday 3. Releasing in the shadow of a well-received Payday 3 update, as we just saw in Arma 2.0, would also make those optics a whole lot better for the company. So my major takeaway from all this is that it seems as though they finally understood that this chapter of conventionally releasing and marketing Payday 3 alongside a publishing partner doing things by the book is over. Now might be an opportunity to return to their more guerrilla development roots to rekindle a spark in the franchise. Whether that's through a more concerted focus on Payday 3 and a return to consistent updates, the addition of peer-to-peer matchmaking, finally tapping into the audience just waiting to pick up the game once it stops being always online, or breathing life back into Payday 2's rotting corpse, I won't be disappointed. I just believe it's crucial for the long-term future of this franchise that they retain talent at the studio, keep engaging with fans of all perspectives, and never lose sight of what drove their first 12 years of success. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed what has ended up being a bit of a heavy speculation video. Let me know what you'd think of a return to Payday 2 updates. Would it be a sign of throwing in the towel and taking a step backwards, or could it herald a return to form as the entire company looks to throw its weight behind what made it so successful in the past? Either way, I do think it's going to make for an entertaining summer for Payday fans. Take care guys, have a great week, and I'll see you all in the next video. A huge thank you to my dedicated Patreon backers. If you want to join this crew in going infamous, check out the link below and pledge as little as $2 to see your name in the credits, or get 24-hour early access to future videos and vote on upcoming content. Take care, I'll see you all soon.